This is our video for Unit 4, Day 2. What we're looking at today is moving on from those fraction operations and actually working with some problems involving proportions and ratios. So a proportion is a mathematical statement that says two ratios are equal. Ratio, you see the word used a lot, means the same thing as fraction. Ratio and fraction mean the same thing. This is where we get the phrase proportional or in proportion. It comes from this word proportion, right? So it means two ratios, two fractions are equal. So when we set up proportion, that means we're working an equation down to something where there's only one fraction on either side of the equal sign. Alright, so we have one fraction equal to another fraction, that's proportion. If there's more than one fraction on one side of the equal sign, it's not a proportion. So the way we do this, we set up where there's one fraction on the other side, is we combine fractions. So when we combine fractions, what we mean by that is adding and subtracting. I reviewed that yesterday. Remember, we add and subtract fractions by finding a common denominator and combining them that way. So here's three examples of problems to look at whether or not is a proportion. So look at the first one. 1 over 2 equals 5 over 10. This one is a proportion. Alright, it's one fraction equal to another fraction. 1 over 2 is the same ratio as 5 to 10. Second one, we have a variable involved. X over 7 equals 5 over 35. It's still a proportion. Right, the way it's set up, it's one fraction on either side of the equal sign. 1 ratio x to 7 has the same ratio as 5 to 35. Then we get to the other side, or third one, this one is not a proportion. While on the left side of the equal sign, we have two fractions. Alright, we have two ratios, so it needs to be down to one ratio. We could still make this a proportion if we add the two fractions together, but for right now, we're just going to be able to identify whether there's a proportion or not a proportion. One thing you'll see in this unit is a little bit different notation used. So this fraction, 2/3, fraction where 2 is actually over the 3, or writing it like this, these are all three the same thing. So you can see fractions or ratios written three different ways. So some of the problems we'll do using ratio and proportions, there'll be different ways we describe ratios. So one way is just to state the ratio of one thing to another. Right, how much there is of one thing compared to how much there is of another thing. Alright, so for example, school might have a teacher-student ratio. Alright, or you might look at the ratio of male to female students in a school. Another way you can do that, instead of saying the ratio of one thing to another, you can talk about parts out of the whole. Right, if you do any cooking or baking, you hear this term used a lot, using parts instead of ratio. So, example, mixing 1 part flour, 2 parts milk, or equal parts of water and de-ice, or whatever it is. When using parts, it gets a little bit trickier, since parts are ratios of pieces compared to each other, but not parts out of the total. So that's what makes it a little trickier when we're using parts, is you have to think about what the total is, because it's not given to us like it is in a ratio. So if you were to see a problem like this, we'll just go through how this works. If you mix 2 parts syrup, 1 part lemon juice to make lemonade, what is the ratio of lemon juice to lemonade? Alright, this is why this is a little bit tricky. So if we think about we're mixing 1 part lemon juice to 2 parts syrup. So there's 3 parts total, which means the ratio of lemon juice to our total lemonade is actually 1 to 3. Alright, it's a little bit confusing because that 3, that doesn't show up anywhere. We have 1 parts to 2 parts, but that 1 part makes up 1/3 of the total ratio. So that's actually it for the notes today. Everything else you're going to be doing today, you're going to be working through on your own, kind of seeing proportions in different contexts. So on the back of this sheet, you're going to be creating your own proportions with a set of numbers, and then we're going to kind of get into some word prompt situations where you'll see proportions applied to different situations. If you're going to the worksheets and you need some help, want to look for a different video or something else to help you out and other resources, you can search for proportions and ratios and find some good resources there. That's it for the video for today. Notes are done, so go ahead and start with the practice. If you have any questions, let me know, or you can look for proportions ratios, Google that yourself.